Yeah.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Okay, Walid. I'm so happy to be with you.
Hello.
I'm like a fanboy. I'm like so, so I am
Very kind.
I've listened to every single one of your episodes. And
Thank
for
you.
all of you that didn't know, I vote for him as one of the best podcasters in Singapore because of
Oh,
the way you
wow.
question, right? So
Okay.
I mean, come to think of it, I shouldn't have any lower expectation from a prof science professor, right? Like you should be able to ask very good questions, huh? Yeah, but for everyone tuning in, and if they don't know you, walk us through a little bit about what you do and your platform.
Right. So, hi, I'm Walid Jumlat Abdullah. You can call me Walid, and I do. I'm a political scientist, if it can be considered a science. I study politics, and I'm currently at NTU.
Mm.
But I do the show, the Instagram live show, which is converted into a podcast. That's on my own. That's nothing to do with my institution. I just wanted to say you have a very professional setup. I'm using books to put my phone, and I'm using a
Mm.
$20 ring light. Yeah, so I need to improve on the aesthetics.
No, no, you're good. You're good. I mean, important is the platform, the followership, and the kind of people tuning in, right? I think you're doing good stuff, right? So, but for us, we've come a long way. Yeah, we also start with books and ring light and rubbish mic. So
Yeah, yeah,
everyone starts somewhere,
yeah. Right, okay.
But great,
Yeah.
great, important. So all that's being recorded today will also be posted into our podcast platform, which I probably say is one of the largest personal finance podcasts, right? So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
it is what it is. But importantly, I think today I want to spend more time talking to you or having a discussion with you about why young adults should be more political, or at least
Sure.
like how most of us are underappreciating it, because I think the current narrative has made politics very dirty.
Mm,
It make people feel like, yeah, you political then like, are you anti-nationalist
mm.
or what have you, right? So generally I can tell, even in our community, a lot of people just want to invest and make money and do their thing, and they'll be like, let's just leave politics to the big guys, we shouldn't
Right,
be part of it. So
right.
I'm having you on to really dispel this thing, right? So I want to hear your view, like why should we be political, or should be more political?
Right. Okay, so firstly, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure and honor. And I think that there is a saying, that goes, you may not care about politics, but politics damn sure cares about you. Everything that we do, or every single thing in our life, is political, right? The price of bread is political, right? I mean, inflation is related to what goes on in the political sphere, political decisions made internationally and even locally, right? So you cannot run away from that. And can you really think of something that is not political? Even marriage is not my marriage, but the definition of marriage, or what should be marriage, how, whether it should be between a man and a woman, or whether you should allow gay marriage. All of these are political decisions. There is nothing that is, or very very few things that are free from politics, right? If you are a football fan now, you know that the EPL clubs have decided to take a knee for the next season, the upcoming season. There is a political decision, a political protest. So even in sports, where people generally think it's not political, but sports has always actually been quite political, right? So there is essentially nothing that is not in the political realm, or directly or indirectly. Everything is political. Where Lee Kuan Yew had this very famous line. He mentioned in either 87 or 88 National Day rally, if I remember correctly. But he said something to this effect. He said, "We would not have made the progress that we have made uh, if we did not decide, we as in the PAP did not decide where you live, how you live, where you speak, whether you can speak, and so on. Basically, down to the very, very fine details. All of these are political decisions. Now, if everything in our life is directly or indirectly associated with politics, then it only makes sense for us to have some knowledge of the political. Being political, first of all, doesn't mean Singapore, being anti-Singapore. That's nothing to do with it, right? You can be. There are some political people who are anti-Singapore, but most people are not, right? Being political also is different from being partisan. Being partisan means you support a party, whether it's a PAP or the opposition or any of the opposition parties. That's not what I mean when I say we should be political, right? Being political means actively caring and thinking and taking the time to know about political developments, because whether you like it, even where you live in and who your neighbor is, those are results of political decisions.
Who your neighbor is.
Right, because of the ethnic integration policy,
I
right, this
know,
quota.
I know.
So these are yeah,
Mm.
and it's amazing, right? If you really think about it, how politics permeates every single aspect of our lives. But there are many people, not some. How you started off this podcast, right? That's the most one of the most important questions to us in Singapore, right? Why is it that people are not political, right? Or they
Mm.
see being political as a dirty word. Mostly, I think, because they associate being political with being partisan,
Mm.
right? Again, even if you were a partisan, I don't think there's anything wrong as long as you know why you're doing that. But that's not what I'm calling for, right? I'm saying we just should be more aware of political developments.
Yes, and I think on my platform, on our platform, we talk a lot about investing. We talk about all this stuff, right? And I honestly think I'm just teaching people, or at least we are trying to educate people on how to swim.
Mm.
Okay, but the reality is you can actually change the parameters of the pool, right?
Mm.
And that that is
Right,
where politics come in, right? So maybe
right.
you should, can you, I don't know if this would help our audience to understand, but I do think the origins of anything matters. So maybe you could kind of walk us through a little bit of like how politics became so dirty, or
Right, okay.
this vibes of like, "Ugh, why you're so political, right?"
Right. So I think there are a few factors here, right? One is um, how politics manifests itself in many other countries, not necessarily Singapore, but to a lesser extent, yes, Singapore as well, but in many other countries, right? Because ultimately, the primary manifestation, not the only manifestation, the primary manifestation of politics is the struggle for power, right? And the struggle for elected office. And in some countries, right, it results in assassination attempts. In some countries, there are manufactured riots. In some countries, people are party hop. We can see this in our neighboring countries as well. People party hop, and they buy elections and so on. And there are always negative connotations to this, right? So even in Singapore, you see, for instance, people who enter the opposition, right? I've seen this before, somebody in front of my eyes saying that, oh, I support that opposition politician, right? And then within a couple of sentences, right, say, oh, I don't want to be pictured with that person because my employers may not like it. So it's just in your mind, right? You're
Mm.
self-censoring in your mind, right? But you have this impression, partly unfairly, partly fairly, because you've seen what has happened to opposition members in the past, even though that's in the distant past, right? It's still there's still some memories, institutional memory, probably, right? So that is how people come to this conclusion. But we must understand that even though I say the primary manifestation of politics is in the struggle for power, that's not the only manifestation. So in every other aspect, including personal finance, right, political decisions affect how we can invest, where we can invest, and so on, right? Uh,
Fair, fair. So then when we look at it from that light, how can we participate then? Like as an average individual, okay, if I am soaked to the idea that, okay, politics affect my personal finance, and I should be a little bit more political. How can I participate if I don't want to be an activist? Because I think a lot of people do associate as like, oh, you want to participate, then you either be an activist or you join the opposition. Because if you are with the main narrative already, you don't really need to do much.
Right,
What I'm saying. Yeah.
right. So, Reggie, the questions you're asking me are not the questions you sent, but it's fine. It's fine. It's okay. It's a free flowing discussion.
Yeah, free
You know,
flowing
but
discussion.
that's yeah, that's an excellent question, right? And I think first of all, the most important thing for me, the second I would say is voting. The most important thing is just keep up to date as much as possible with day-to-day developments. Now, I understand this is a lot to ask for an average individual, the average citizen, and it may not be possible for you to follow every single political development, but at least the major ones, right, that are covered in the newspapers, the major ones, we should keep up to speed with them, right? So in the past couple of weeks, there has been a lot of discussion on race, and then the concomitant institutions, right, like the GRC, the ethnic integration policy, whether
Mm.
these are relevant. And we have seen in the past year a very, very vibrant discussion on the minimum wage, right? Such that the chairman of MAS himself, right, is going out and basically almost endorsing the idea to the extent that it has never been endorsed before, right?
Yes.
So and that's a financial thing, right? And because that would affect all other things, right? The tax rates and so on. So at the very least, the first thing we must do is we must keep up to date with the major developments, right?
Mm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, voting, do not underestimate the power of the vote, right? Because a lot of times in my from my experience, I think Singaporeans do not understand the power of their vote. They think, oh, what's the point, right? It's only one vote, right? But if you add up all of those votes, it amounts to something. And the third thing is just individual action on a daily basis or on a regular basis, and this includes writing to your MPs about something. Writing to your MPs, right, doesn't just have to be about constituency issues, like, oh, the NTUC is far, or there's no ATM near my house. I mean, those you can write to your MP about that as well.
My bus
What?
break down all the
Yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah. I got a fine, parking fine, which I just got last week. I'm not gonna write to my MP, okay? I'm just gonna pay. Yeah, so you should not be just be writing. You can write to your MP about that, but it can also be about national issues, right? And then a lot of times there's a defeatist mindset. Oh, what can I do? But okay, chances are probably your emails would not change things on national issues. Chances are, if you email them, probably it won't change anything. But if you don't email them, you'll definitely not change anything,
Mm.
right? So I'll take small probability over zero probability, right?
Mm.
And also, if when you give them feedback and they see that this comes from a lot of people, then they think, oh, actually this is something a lot of people are thinking about. But if you never tell them, even though there are many others who think like you, they would never know what
Mm.
to act on. Ultimately, MPs, and there's also a problem, I guess, with Asians generally. We are very polite to seniors, people in authority, which is a good thing. Even my students, they are generally very polite and respectful. The downside to that is probably that may inhibit them from disagreeing with me in
Mm.
class, probably, right?
Mm. Mm.
Just out of
Agree.
respect for authority or something.
Shout out to
And
Megan, right?
hey, Megan roasted me, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
She
Anyway, this is
said,
an insider
yeah,
joke.
she said,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
for
Oh,
all
but
of
she's
you
good.
listening,
Megan,
yeah, you
Megan
should
is
hop on to.
excellent.
Yeah, yeah. For all of you listening, and you don't know this joke, right? You should listen to Walid's platform, right? Teh Tarik Walid, and then the joke will the joke will suffice. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So she's good. She's good. So uh, I think we have that problem sometimes when I've seen this also again with my own eyes. There are many people who criticize their MPs, right? When their MPs come, right, they never raise these criticisms because it's uncomfortable, right? You don't want to criticize a person, and generally that's just human nature, I suppose, right? So like half the time, right, things you say online to a person, you never say to that person in real life,
Mm.
right? The criticisms, because we want to be polite to people. So If we don't do that, if we don't email, and when they come, we don't articulate our concerns, right, about national issues or constituency issues, they would never know. Then who should you blame after that? If you don't raise and they don't know, who should you blame, right? So I would say yes, there's a power imbalance, of course, but we do as much as possible in our power, in our hands, and we have ultimately, right, and this is something I really wanted to emphasize, which is no dictator or no authoritarian, no matter how dictatorial or how authoritarian. So no political party, no politician, no matter how authoritarian or dictatorial, is ever fully insulated from public pressure.
Yes.
It's only to the extent. So in liberal democracies, you are more insulated. In authoritarian countries, you are you are more insulated. In liberal democracies, you are less insulated from public pressure. So they still have to respond to public pressure no matter what. So you think about the worst of dictators or the most dictatorial, like people like the Mubarak regime in Egypt that time, and single party countries, right? There is still a possibility of revolution if people are really really unhappy, right? And it has happened before. And by the way, Singapore is not a dictatorship, even though there are some people who describe it as that. That would be an unfair characterization. This podcast is not sponsored by the PAP, okay? But in the name of in the name of intellectual honesty, right? We have to be honest, and it's not. I mean, it's not a liberal democracy for sure. Anybody who says that
Mm,
is also not being honest. It's
mm,
somewhere in between. Some people say it's an illiberal democracy. Some people say it's competitive authoritarian.
mm,
Whatever term you call it. I mean, the space is limited, but there's still space. Elections are uh, not really fair. They are not completely fair, but they are quite free, and they are not fraudulent. That's the most important thing, which is why our vote really matters. And not even that, you know even marketing companies, right, they monitor public sentiments online, right?
yes,
Do you really think our government and governments in the world doesn't do
they
not
do.
do not monitor public? Of course they do.
Mm,
And it in fact it will be a dereliction of duty if they didn't, right? What's
yes,
my point?
yes.
My point is, they whatever you post also, cumulatively it adds to something, right? So all of these are actions or acts of activism where we may not call ourselves activists, but all of these are acts that we can do in our daily lives, right? So, and I always feel that you can you can make a difficult point without being a difficult person. I don't always live up to that adage. I don't always live up to it, but I think you can do that. Yeah. So
Mm.
a lot of times you're afraid. Uh, okay, sometimes.
Okay, wait. I
Oh
think
yeah, carry on. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I can.
I
Sorry,
I
sorry.
think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the part about you can always raise difficult points without being a difficult person, right?
Mm.
Recently I thought about it and I'm like, really, do we want to hold you know uh counterpoint to the main narrative to such a high standards?
No, we don't
Yeah,
have
it
to.
right, yeah, exactly, right. So the kind of social dissent, or people are so angry about certain things, and why can't they just put an Instagram post and then tag the ministry, or all that kind of stuff, rather than it feels like if you are unhappy with certain things, I honestly think people are broadly happy with certain things and very
Yeah,
unhappy with other things, and it's a different permutation for everyone, right? So
right.
whoever that really really hates it probably already left already. Okay, so so everyone that's still around likes something and don't like some stuff.
Right.
But do we really need to, as an average individual, be so informed that we put out a very good argument against it, and
No,
so to be respected of our views? You know what I mean?
no. So
Mm,
so you are right. In theory, you shouldn't be, and anybody can just. Sometimes it's done purposely, sometimes unintentionally, right? People, oh, the tone is not right. I really don't like that, right? The tone policing, and go to the substance of what is said.
mm,
However, why did I say that you can raise? Because you don't want people to use that as a distraction, right? So for those who can articulate dissent or unhappiness in an elegant manner, they should do that as much as possible, right? At the same time, we shouldn't dismiss those who are unable to do that by saying this person is rude or anything, because a lot of times that's the distraction. Look at the substance. Is there meat? Is there meat there? So in order to prevent our points from being used, not being used, being ignored on the basis of tone, right? So just for those who can, they should. And I think your audience probably would be those who have a certain level, right? Certain level of ability, and probably can articulate things in a particular manner. Yeah. So
Okay, okay. So
I wouldn't expect this from my parents generation or what, my parents, my dad, he was always from young super political, right? Now the concepts, he didn't articulate them in concepts, but he was smarter than I was, than I am, right? And he was able to really understand what
really, he's
politics is
smarter
about.
than you are?
Oh, for sure, 100%. 100%. I
Okay,
have no
okay.
doubts. I have no doubts about that. Yeah. So he wasn't educated. He's illiterate, but I think he's much smarter than I am. I think, and he's able to articulate and understand all those things. I wouldn't expect somebody like him to be able. I mean, he's illiterate, so he cannot write a post anyway. He passed on recently in February. So, but he. I mean, when he was alive, I wouldn't expect him to be able to write that. I don't have the expectation of him. I probably have that expectation of you. Even then, if you are if you are angry on a bad day, I would never judge you for writing something inelegantly, right? Yeah, as in I wouldn't dismiss the point completely. I'm just saying that the nature of people, especially people who have power, they tend to be more defensive. It's just natural, right? You are more defensive of what you have created. So in order for them to not their defensiveness not to be triggered immediately. So let their defensiveness be triggered by the substance rather than by the tone.
Okay, fair, fair. Which is why you are very supportive of some of the NNP speeches, right?
Very, very.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and we can talk about that later. So
Sure, sure.
I want to walk through some of the points that you've said, right? And let's start with point number 3 about individual action. All right, so you want to email the your member of parliament, not for ticket fines, not for small little things, but even on bigger scale stuff, the
Yep,
national stuff, right?
yep.
What are your thoughts on being a little bit more organized in this, like organized tagging or organized emails or organized, open letters and trying to create viral content for the MPs to see it. Essentially, the whole idea of pooling together, right, rather than just an
Yeah.
individual stuff. Right?
Yeah,
What is your
so
thought on
so
organizing that? Yeah.
definitely I think people in other countries have done it. I mean I'm not against it for sure. I think it's another legitimate tool. I even see many younger people do that. So I've
Mm,
seen a couple of open letters where they give a template and then you can not a couple, maybe 4 or 5 just in this past 6 7 months alone. And these are people my students' age, so 23, 24-ish. Yeah, so I do see that on the environment. Even I saw one on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. I think I saw one probably on the nurses and hijab. I think I've seen a few that younger people are doing this because obviously they recognize that this, and also it's much easier to have a template rather than for you to write. Sometimes the thing, right, that makes people turn off, they want to do it but they're just too lazy to do it.
mm,
Yeah, so that could be a legitimate one as well. Although you must also realize that if you get as an MP, if you get a letter that is the same letter, just signed by 100 different names, right? 100 emails you get, so but it's the same letter versus 60 or 70 letters, so slightly fewer, but all worded differently, right? I think the
mm,
letter probably would have more impact for you.
fair,
The
fair.
first, right? The first one you'll see, oh,
Mm.
this one maybe just people jumping on the bandwagon or whatever. The second one, oh, people are really, really passionate about it. Yeah.
Fair, fair.
Mm.
And I think these days there are a lot of ways to go about whether is it tagging or petition. I think online
Absolutely.
petition is becoming a thing.
Absolutely.
Do you
Yeah.
in the past if the
Yeah.
government wants to bulldoze Dover Forest, they can just do it, But the whole petition,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
changed the narrative and
Oh,
all.
for sure,
It's
for sure.
it's
So
pretty wild.
people must never be defeatist and say, "What's the point of this?" There is always a point. Yeah. Mm.
Great, great, great. So I think for all of you listening, you definitely want to, if you're passionate about a certain thing, you must, be engage in it. And there are a lot of low hanging
Absolutely.
fruits that you don't need to be very
Absolutely.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
Tag your MPs, tag a ministry, sign petitions, and whatever. I
Yeah.
think those are good points.
Yeah.
Yeah, and about voting. Right. So
Yeah.
voting, um, free and fair election, is that thing, right? And then you said that we're not free and fair.
Oh,
Maybe
we are free. We are
we're
quite free,
free.
but we are not. You're not really fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to put you in the spotlight. I think PJ Tam did a lot of question, a lot of content in this
Yeah.
also, and
Yeah.
he put out his position of why
Yeah.
he thinks that this is not like it's not fair and what have you, right? But some people will label him a little bit, on the far,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I want to
Left.
hear
Yeah.
your perspective on that. Yeah.
Right. So I did listen to his series, and
Mm,
I think it's a good series. I don't necessarily agree with everything he said, and on this part, I think this is my disagreement with him. I do not think you can say that voting in Singapore, the voting results do not uh, accurately depict public sentiment, because I think they do. I think
mm,
they do. There's not, people say, oh, there's a lot of barriers. Yes, and I also acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. For instance, I think the redrawing of boundaries, that's something that I don't think should happen as often as it does. The size of the GRCs, I've been on record saying that it should be reduced to a maximum of two. Uh, I think there are some things that we can have the electoral commission to be not under the prime minister's office, to be
mm,
independent, right? So there are many things that we can do, and these are the things that prevent me from saying that it's a fair election. But it's relatively free. It's very free. I think there's no corruption, there's no fraudulent, there's very little money in politics, right? I mean, our elections, even the opposition say it's clean. There's voting is secret, even though many people think it's not, and that's a myth that needs to be busted. So everything, all of that make the results uh, credible. And if people are unhappy, they have voted against the PAP in the past. So you cannot have it both ways. You cannot say, and this is if I had PJ on, and I know PJ, and I know I have respect for what he does, but I mean, doesn't mean I have to agree with everything he says, right? But
of
if I
course, of
had
course,
PJ,
and that's
if I yeah, yeah. So, and if I
mm,
had PJ here, right, I would tell him, right, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot say 2020 or 2011, right, showed that the people wanted change, but then 2015, right, is not reflective of public sentiment,
mm,
right?
mm,
Or 1997 or 2001. You cannot say that, right? Because people have a choice. Ultimately, no one puts a gun to their head. Now, you can say, oh, they are afraid of whatever it is. Being afraid of something is also like being afraid of losing a job, for instance. That's a legitimate concern. That's a legitimate uh, um, thing to consideration when you are voting, right? So I think the election results ultimately reflect the pulse of the nation, where they are at. And right now, the pulse of the nation is where we want the PAP in charge, but we want a slightly reformed PAP, and we want more checks and balances. Now,
mm,
is it always going to be like that? No. The PAP don't People always assume that the PAP support is on a downward trajectory. No, you cannot put it past them that if they rectify certain things, they can win more public support. But at the end of the day, I do not think the results are not credible. Yeah, I
mm.
think they definitely reflect where we are at.
Yeah, for all of you that somehow don't know, 2011, 2020 is when they lost one GRC each, and 2015 is when Lee Kuan Yew died, and then
2022. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, as in 1+1. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So 2015 is when Lee Kuan Yew died, and they won a lot of votes, right? So
Right.
so I think that's a little bit of context based on what
Yeah.
Walid has put out. Okay, fair. So I can broadly agree with your points that it reflects sentiments, and people should take their vote seriously,
Yeah.
and they should take their vote in a like I think I've definitely heard you say that you shouldn't already have someone to vote in mind already, right? So your
Yeah.
vote must always be fought for. Like the
Yes.
politicians must always fight for your vote, right?
Yes.
So can you walk us through your thoughts about this?
Right. So I actually said this in episode 2 of Teh Tarik. So wow, you have really
Bro,
listened to.
I really listen, and I know you vibe with you stand with Nicosia, and
Yes, I do.
I know all of that. Okay, I am a listener. Yes, yes.
I do. Okay,
Very
yeah.
excited
So,
here. Yes.
so, so it's true. It's true. I think the moment you pledge your vote to a party unconditionally, you become irrelevant.
mm,
right? You become irrelevant because then what's the point of the? Why would the party go out of its way to listen to you? They
mm,
know that they've gotten your vote. So I always say this: you can be fans of political parties and politicians, but you must never be sycophants of political parties and politicians, and you must never be sycophants of anybody actually. Yeah. So you can be fans, but you must always say that, my vote is always up for grabs. I'm leaning here, but I'm willing to be persuaded. Only then your vote would be taken seriously. Honestly, right? Tell you in Singapore, probably my estimate, right? And this estimate is based on the 2011 presidential elections. Because the presidential elections, if you remember, right? I'm sure you do, Reggie. There are four. There were four candidates, right? One Tony Tan, and he represented PAP basically,
PAP.
right, in the
Mm,
minds of the voters. One was Tan Jise. He represented the opposition in the minds of the voters. And Tan Cheng Bok represents at that point in time, uh yeah, he's somewhere, he's, and not establishment but not opposition also, right? So a middle ground opposition, or yeah, something like that. And Tan Kinlan, honestly, I don't know where to put him in. Yeah, I don't know how he got 5%, close to 5%, other than
mm,
he has many friends and family members. Yeah, but let's use the other three, right? So the ones who voted for Tony Tan, we can safely say these are hardcore PAP fans,
mm,
hardcore PAP supporters. The one who voted for Tan Jise, we can safely say hardcore opposition supporters, right? So if the sky is blue, is the PAP's fault, right? Is that kind? And also the the other one, yeah, or no matter what, the PAP is right. So those people, right? I presume that the PAP is not too worried about that 25%, because no matter what they do, they can never get that 25%, right? It is this, the Tan Cheng Bok voter, right? The Tan Cheng Bok in 2011 voter, right? That all parties are going for. That
mm.
that middle ground, right? The 33% that vote for the PP, yeah, the PP knows that they will still have to take care of them, but they really, really go after all the parties go after this middle ground, right? So the moment we pledge support to a party unconditionally, I think that is not a wise thing to do. So I would never say, oh, I will always vote for this person, right? I would never even say that about Nicole Sia, right?
I just stand with
Yeah.
her, right? That's not me.
Yeah,
That's not
I
that's
stand
not
with
me.
her.
I
Yeah,
vote for her.
yeah. Doesn't mean I will vote for her under any circumstance, right? Because I
Mm,
think my relevance, right, as an individual, right, one of the main things why I'm relevant is because of my vote. And
mm.
if I feel like if parties feel like they do not need to fight for my vote anymore, then there goes my relevance.
Okay, fair. So then, what are your thoughts on money in politics then? In the sense of not like big money in politics, where you have. I think a lot of people talk about how like we're comparing the US, but the US is a very different system from
Sure,
where we are,
sure.
But I do think that for individuals like myself and most of the people out there that has a little bit extra cash, right? Like you're not living mouth to mouth or month to month. You
Right,
have
hand to
more
mouth. Yeah,
money, you can invest, you can do all these things. You are supporting
yeah.
charity. Why aren't we putting money with like NGOs or putting money with think tanks or putting money with like even opposition parties and all that, right? So what are your thoughts on putting your money where you believe and then supporting all these causes and what have you?
Yeah, you can. I think there's nothing stopping you. So for me personally, right, I always do not want any formal affiliation with any political parties, right? And that's just me, because I think I'm a political analyst. So if at the moment I'm associated with any political party formally, then I think there goes my credibility, I think, right? People would not take me seriously, and you're not, I don't know how many people take me seriously now, but even less so, right? So I think I personally wouldn't do that. But I think if you feel strongly, not just the opposition, even the PAP, right? You can
Yes,
you can
yes.
support them, you can buy stuff, whatever it is. You can talk to your MP, and there are many programs within the constituencies, both opposition and PAP wards, where they help low income, for instance, and you can and you should donate to those causes also, right?
Mm,
And because these are very targeted, and because these people have the resources to know, basically they'll know where the low income are in their constituencies, and they have certain programs. So you can ask MPs, how you can support them. But more so than money, right, Reggie, one of the most difficult things is to contribute time, right?
Mm,
And you know this, right? As a working adult, if you are comfortable or slightly comfortable, right, it's much easier to part with your money than with your time, right?
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I think the ultimate test, if you can contribute for a working adult, for an undergrad, the ultimate test is whether you can contribute money. But for a
mm,
working adult, the ultimate test is whether you can contribute time. Yeah.
mm, mm. But
Yeah.
I would say, people should not underestimate, should not underestimate the power of the money, right? In a sense of, a lot of people tell me like, oh, you talk so much about it, why don't you go and volunteer? I'm like, dude, I can record a piece of content and I will influence 10,000 people compared to,
Oh,
going and
absolutely.
volunteer
No,
an hour and
no.
all
I
that,
think
right?
this
So,
is this is time. This is giving
mm,
time for a political
mm,
cause, right? I'm not saying
mm, mm.
like you go on the ground and do that. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
like
saying that.
must give
That's
out
one way.
hamper
No,
and
no, no,
everything.
no. Yeah, yeah,
So yes,
exactly. That's
yes,
one
yes.
way of doing it. But I'm not. I consider my podcast series is public service. I don't get any money from it. In fact, I spend a little bit,
Mm,
for Spotify and to pay someone who volunteered to do the poster, but I just pay her a nominal amount anyway. So I don't get anything from it. I don't even get like 1 million views or anything, right? So for me, I just consider that that's giving my time for a particular cause, which is to increase political awareness. And you are doing
mm,
the same as well. So this is
mm,
public service in a way, right? Yeah. So I think there are many ways that we can think about our time, and of course money as well, which I do not deny. And there are many different, and again go back to our earlier definition of being political. There are many different NGOs that we can contribute to, and we can consider those as political acts, right? Yeah.
mm. So does that then mean that so that's the touchy part, right? So does that mean that we support money in politics? I know it's a bit blanket in that sense, or
Yeah.
or or this
Yeah.
has to be
So
very nuanced. Yes.
right. So it has to be, everything has to be nuanced, right? So
Mm, mm,
somebody once told me, right, the true mark of a scholar is nuance, right? But
mm,
at the
mm.
same time, right, we mustn't. Sometimes nuance is used as an excuse for people not to take stands, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah, so that's irritating also. But it has to be nuanced. So money in politics, right, as we understand it in America, right, is very different, because money in politics, you have lobby groups, you have people basically buying politicians, right? That
Yes.
doesn't happen in Singapore, thankfully, because we have regulations against it, right? We have limitations to how much we can spend and so on, and it's quite an American problem. Of course, Malaysia has its own sets of problems with money in politics as well. So we that problem will solve itself based on the laws that parties are allowed to spend on certain on elections. How much is it per voter? So I don't think we have to worry about that in Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, fair, fair. Okay, cool stuff. So, for all of you listening, if you believe in a certain cause, you have something that you want to go for, do the action, support, put your money where you believe in. I think all those things are great causes. And I think so far we have definitely established that, small little things can go a long way. And, don't just
Absolutely.
be on the sidelines and keep complaining and complaining, right? Do something about it. Right. So yeah, and talking about keeping up with the facts, right? Keeping up with the news, keeping up with the updates. I'm backtracking the 3 points that you've put up, right?
Sure.
How do we keep up? Okay, the reality is media is always biased, right? There's always a certain viewpoint, certain perspective, how content is
Absolutely.
being laid out, like why is it cut here,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so can you kind of help us understand how do we consume political media in a savvy fashion?
Right. So
Mm,
I think for those who have the time, so I'll give a few different answers. For
mm,
those who have the time, right, read as many sources as possible, right? So if you're gonna read the Online Citizen, for instance, then you read Straits Times as well, right? And then you balance it, right? Straits Times, Mothership, and then the Online Citizen. So you shouldn't just consume one of these. Some are more pro-establishment, some are more anti-establishment. Read from a varied amount of sources, and then you have to make your conclusions nonetheless. There is no such thing as no bias, right? Everybody, you have a bias, I have a bias. It's just about how we can overcome those biases to the extent possible, right? And you can follow my podcast. That's another way to
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
to be
yeah. Not so
politically
shameless plug, right?
not shameless at all.
Yeah, yeah.
So and there are people who do that. I mean, I know. Do you know this guy, Joel Lim? He has Instagram. He hasn't been doing he does Instagram live. He hasn't been doing episodes recently, but he does some good stuff as well. You mentioned just now PJ Tam has series. He has this
It's
new
quite a
narrative
machine going
series.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So his one is
yeah, yeah.
much more
Yeah,
professional
different
than
level, not
mine, right?
volunteer, not volunteer level.
Yeah,
Different.
his one
Yes,
is
yes.
different level. So you can listen to him. So you follow people from different. You follow Bertha Hansen. You follow the ministers. You follow the opposition, and then you read what they have to say as well. So ultimately, right, is this is the difficult part, right? You cannot have a good understanding without putting in the work also, right?
Mm,
And really, if we really think about it, it's not even that much. It is work, but it's not that much work, right? How much time do we spend mindlessly scrolling through Facebook and Instagram, right?
mm,
How
mm,
much time do we do that? And we play silly games on our phones. I have this particular game now on my phone that I'm a bit addicted to, and it's a silly, stupid game, right? And I know that intellectually, but it still takes time. So if we can do all of that, right, why can't we do things? Set aside maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, right? And just think about to read stuff that would make us think about things that would matter to us.
mm,
Uh,
mm. So by reading all these things, right? It's good to read broad and all that, but how do I then come to a position on things? Because I think sometimes it's a problem with intellectuals or probably a lot of people in the thinking economy, right? You're okay, yeah, I agree with these points. It's a liberal problem also. Yeah, yeah, everybody has a point. So then what's my point? Right? Like, so where do I stand? Right? So
yeah, yeah. So,
yeah, yeah.
so I, so I would always say, when people say, "Oh, there are no right or wrong answers," no, there are right and wrong answers,
Based on your
right?
moral
For
structure,
some,
right? Based on what you
yeah,
believe in.
exactly,
Yes, yes.
exactly. And also for some issues, maybe yes, it depends. The answer is more personal, but for some issues, they are just facts. There are wrong answers, so we can never say that. We can never say, "Oh, there are no right or wrong answers," right? That's again,
Mm,
you are right that sometimes people on our side, right? This is a cop out for, oh, because we don't want to hurt feelings, right? So yes, reading widely is the first step, and ultimately, right, what I would say is my philosophy in life is always to take everything skeptically, in a skeptical manner. Whatever people say, you take it in a skeptical manner, especially if it comes from politicians. Unless I have established a personal relationship with a person, right, and I know your integrity and credibility 100%, right. But
mm,
and I mean, this is for non-politicians. For politicians, it doesn't matter whether they are white, blue, red, whatever it is, right. I will always behave in a very skeptical manner. My first instinct is to doubt. Now, but I do not, or I try as far as possible not to be cynical.
mm,
Sometimes I feel so. Be skeptical. I am skeptical, but I wouldn't be cynical. Where my first instinct is to disbelief. My first instinct is to doubt, not disbelief. And the moment we become cynical, right? It's a very it's more pernicious than we think, because there's a tendency to become hopeless. Or then
mm,
we say, what's the point? Right? If we
mm, mm,
disbelieve everything, right? Oh, what's the point of doing this? But if you are doubt, right, I think it keeps you on your toes. If you're doubtful, keeps you on your toes, and the thirst for seeking the truth is there, right?
mm,
But then
mm,
it needs to be acted on. Ultimately, you have to come to a judgment call, right? So let's take a hot button issue, right, which is related to your which would be relevant to your audience, the minimum wage, right? So the arguments for and against, at least the basic arguments, we must understand, right? So the minimum wage is a market distortion. No getting around it, right? So
yeah.
if you look at classical economics, right, and most economists, especially in the past, would say that this market distortion, you lose employment because people have less resources to employ people, and so on. Firms have, uh, uh, and then the counter argument is, oh, but That's in theory, right? In practice, it has been done in certain countries and it's improved productivity and so on, right? And then ultimately, you have to listen to both sides or multiple sides sometimes, and from independent people, not just from the political parties. And then you have to come to a conclusion based on your value system. What do you value the most, right? So I'll give you another example, right? There is a trade-off sometimes between multiracialism and meritocracy. Both are core principles in Singapore, right? So
mm,
the GRC, you cannot pretend as if there is no violation of meritocracy
mm,
because
mm,
it's a quota. And quotas, by definition, there is a violation of meritocracy. Now, for those who are pro or against GRC, you have to admit that. You have to admit that. And then the question is, because I think that's factual, right? Then the question is, what matters more? Ultimate meritocracy, where you get the very best, or you get very, very good people, maybe not the best that you could get, very, very good people enough, but you have racial representation because there is value in that, right? So you have to come to that conclusion. Only you can come to it yourself
mm.
based on your personal beliefs and values. But then you also need to think about why you believe this thing. Why is this value important to you?
Yeah,
And
but
sometimes we do
I
not think.
yeah, I also
Yeah.
want to add that is not mutually exclusive. You can have, minority representation that is also very, very, very high quality, right? It's not a given.
Oh, no, no, no.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not. It's not. I'm just saying that
It's just in the quota
by
structure.
definition, yeah, by definition, quotas, right? The fact that you had to have quotas already tells us something, right? Yeah,
Mm,
because if what you said, right, is true, then you don't need quotas and you'll get the minorities there anyway, right? So,
mm,
or at the very least, we have to admit that quotas would there is a possibility of merit being compromised. Right?
mm,
A
mm,
strong
mm.
possibility. At the very least, we have to admit that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, you'll get the odd Taman here and there, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
who's head and shoulders above everybody else, right? You'll get SM Taman here and there, and I'm not even saying the people, the minorities in our GRCs are bad. I'm not saying that. They are
Mm,
very good.
mm,
Most of our candidates, right, are really really good. They are top
yeah.
notch. Yeah,
Mm,
I'm just
mm,
saying that when you have quotas, that is a possibility, and people who are for the GRCs like myself have to admit that. Have to admit
mm,
that this is
mm.
a drawback. There is no perfection this side of heaven, right? There's no perfection. So no
Is
public
that even
policy.
heaven? Oh, that's a whole different discussion.
Is that for this podcast? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, no, no,
So
no,
there's no
no, no.
so there is no perfection this side of heaven, right? So
Mm, mm,
every public policy will have its flaws. The question is how whether the benefits overcome the cost, and the benefits and the cost, how you assign the benefits and costs are based on your individual values.
fair, fair. And I also want to say that I'm not the biggest fan of meritocracy as an idea. Okay, but we can elaborate that
Sure.
another time, in another podcast, because
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think it's a fundamentally slavery concept where there are elites and
Oh,
and there are everyone else that are
wow.
building a system and deciding what is merit. Okay, so
Oh, wow.
so
I see the
so
socialist
whoa.
in you.
Whoa. Yeah, yeah. Putting out my positions here. So I'm not against investing in the people and finding the best talent to rule the country. It's very aristocracy. It's fine. I think that's beautiful. But um, to run the whole country on a merit idea where a bunch of people decide what is good and what is not, this is a whole different discussion another time. Okay, okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Sure.
slight banter for that. Yeah, but I wanna I wanna talk a little bit about political interests, because like what you pointed out, a lot of our politicians are top notch, and I do agree. I think they have educationally they are very good. In fact, I think they are too good. They don't really represent everybody on the ground. Okay,
Right.
that's a different discussion another time.
Right.
But they are very good. They know what they're doing. They're very smart. And I don't think that they are corrupt or what have you. But I do think that a lot of average Singaporeans don't recognize their political interests as a politician. Right. So can you help us understand a little bit, like, we shouldn't be blindsided by this, like, oh, like, politicians, they are not technocrats, right? They are not people that are just like, doing the job, right? But they actually have political interests. So how do I
Oh, yeah.
understand that?
Oh,
Yeah, where's their
absolutely. So
mm, mm,
so this is the other thing about us, right? Why have we, and I partly is the PAP's fault, right? For and politicians in general, like saying, oh, okay, first of all, just to sidetrack, right? I've never ever met a politician who says, I've always wanted to be a politician, and I would, if I ever meet somebody like that, I would respect that person so much,
Mm.
because politics is not something you stumble into, right? You suddenly every politician I've met, that I've talked to, oh, I this is by accident, this is by accident. I mean, don't give me this false humility. So it's not by accident. It's not by accident. You don't accidentally become a politician, right? You
Yeah,
must
yeah,
want it to some extent. You were convinced, maybe you were you were initially reluctant or what, but you still wanted it, because nobody can force you. Ultimately, you still want it, right? Now, what's my point, right? My point is, in any other institution or job, right, you would admit that every person has their own interests, has their own personal interests, and then they have their institutional interests, right? And I think politicians, not only they do have interests, and I don't know why we think politicians always do not have individual interests, because they do, and they should have individual interests. Politicians should want to be re-elected. That's their ultimate individual interest,
mm,
right? And there's elite interest, there's politician interest, there's mass interest, and the challenge for us is to ensure that elite interests and mass interests intersect as much as possible. And one of the ways to ensure that is through elections, and to
mm,
make elections as free and as fair as possible. So when people say, oh, they are just doing this to be re-elected, good, I want them to do this to be
mm,
re-elected.
mm,
That personal interest serves the public interest in the long run. If they don't care about re-election, what's stopping them from doing anything?
mm, mm, mm.
Right? So they do have personal interest, and this is the other thing. People should not pretend as if they do not have. Like, both politicians should not pretend that, and the public also should not expect them not to have personal interest. It doesn't make sense, right? If they don't have personal interest, they will be doing this for free, right? And I don't want them to do it for free. I don't expect them to do it for free. I wouldn't do it for free, right?
Mm, mm,
Now,
mm.
so I wouldn't have that unnecessary burden or expectation, but partly is because they have portrayed themselves as such, and that's why the
Yeah, yeah,
public has that expectation of them.
yeah, yeah. Everybody comes from a humble background.
Yeah. Humble, I'm humble, this person is
Humble,
humble.
humble.
Yeah.
First two politicians, oh yeah, quite cool,
Yeah,
They are recruiting from different places. After that, become everybody humble. It's like, what
yeah.
the hell?
Yeah.
PR crisis. But
Yeah, that was
yeah,
bad. That was bad. People see through this,
mm,
people, they desire authenticity as well. Now, you can never know 100% whether a person is authentic, but we make
yes,
judgment calls, right? We
yes,
make
yes.
judgment calls on a daily basis, right? Whether a person
Mm,
is authentic. And so
mm,
people do make judgment calls about whether a politician is authentic, and sometimes it's just so obvious that they are not authentic.
Fair, fair, fair. Totally
Yeah.
get that. So in the light of what we are trying to do, where there are all these things from like GST hike, minimum wage discussion, or even the whole like MOM, different laws, and
Yeah, I
whether
mean,
do we want to bring,
CPF, all
yeah,
this. Yeah,
everything,
yeah, everything,
everything.
everything. Yeah.
Yes, everything links back to personal finance, and it's very, very important. I think we've established so far that this exists, that this is important. So for people that are listening, right, other than doing the lower hanging fruit, like tagging your ministry, donating money, and going for NGOs, are there things that are a little bit more more effective, or can ignite bigger change, like maybe getting the NMP to table a motion, or some of these kind of stuff that it's unique to our institution, because we don't want to just compare to
Yeah.
other institutions and say that, oh, they are better, but no, 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 we're not here to critique
Right.
the political institution, but we're talking about how to
Right.
maneuver, right?
Right.
So
Right.
are there more strategic methods that average
Right. So,
individuals like ourselves can do?
right. As you know, Reggie, I am quite a fan of the NMP
I
scheme,
know,
right?
I
Because
know.
I think NMPs NMPs are uniquely positioned to do something. Even though it's an undemocratic institution, I think it can actually bolster democracy.
Mm.
Now,
To you,
so
it's a political innovation. I know, I know.
it is, yes. so
Yeah.
so I think it's doing it through the NMPs an extremely important one. However, I want to go back to a larger point first before I
Yes.
zoom back in, right? So there is a saying that goes that power concedes nothing without demand. It never has and never will,
Mm.
right? If there's no demand, there's not going to be supply, right?
Okay.
So if you go to an NMP, okay, not you go to an NMP by yourself, then the NMP say, okay, if this is one person's interest, Why should I bring it up? The NMP may still bring it up because the NMP is not bounded by re-election. But the people who are trying to change the law, right? The elected MPs, they are thinking, how many people actually think this, right? So if there is no demand, there will not be supply. So there must be enough demand. So that's why like-minded people, first of all, I think social media has changed the game because it shows that hey, there are other people who think this, and then I contact them and let's see whether we can write to the NMPs. We can even go down to the MPs for those who have uh the bandwidth for that. You can do more than just tagging them on, even though the tagging part, if enough people do it, it's important, as in it can be quite effective, right? But the concept that we must understand is there must be demand. We cannot just expect there to be change without people asking for it, right? You don't expect kindness, right? Kindness has to be extracted. Oh, and you cannot blame them. If you do not demand, how would they know that actually there is appetite
Mm,
for this,
mm,
right? And then if there's demand and then they don't change, that's a separate matter. But at the very least, you must demand for it. And I think you can go to the NMPs, but before that, I think uh you must understand that, or you must know that, oh, there is a sizable amount of people, enough people for this to become a political issue, right? And that's one way of thinking about it, right? The other way, right, if you think this issue is important but it's not, people do not think it's important, and then you do even more heavy lifting. The first one is easy, like that issue is important and you think other people, and other people think it's important, you go to the NMP or you go to your own MP and you ask them to talk about it in parliament or in whatever way. The other way is only you think it's important but most people do not think, but you do some heavy lifting. Okay, then I'll write about it, I'll talk about it, I'll try to change hearts and minds, right?
mm.
And then I'll try to make people think this is important and see my point of view. Now that's a higher level, because much more sacrifice and time and effort. But I mean, people have done it. People have done
Mm.
it. Have tried to convince others. And one of the ways, academic books rarely change people's minds, right? Because nobody reads books, right?
Maybe
But
Teo Yo Yen's book lah. Right, that's
that's the example I wanted to say.
yes.
That's the
Mm.
example I wanted to say. That book has changed the landscape in Singapore,
Yes,
right?
amazing.
Politicians had to react to it, and people have started becoming aware of it. Now everybody talks about inequality. 4 years
Mm,
ago, it wasn't really an issue. I
mm,
mean, people
mm,
did talk about it individually, but very rarely you saw this type of national discourse until the government also had to react to it, right?
mm.
So that's an example of person saying, "Okay, this is important enough. I'm gonna go out of my way to do that." And now, books, podcasts, you have even a wider platform than Yoyan had, right? Yeah, you can potentially affect more minds and change more hearts and minds. So yeah.
Yeah, so please tell Teo Yo Yen to come to our platform. I emailed her,
Oh,
she said no.
oh really? She said no.
Yes, she
What?
said no. So I'm very disappointed. So Teo Yo Yen, I've read the book end to end. I told a lot of people about the book, and one of our core beliefs is we want to help the community recognize that there are a lot of social policies that can be changed so that we can change the game.
Okay.
And
So
yeah, so
I am also a fanboy of Yoyan. Yeah. You asked
yeah.
me to choose between Yoyan and Nicosia. It's very difficult. I think slightly Yoyan ages it slightly. Yeah.
Mm.
So
So yes,
just
please.
in her defense, she has a lot of invitations. Even my my show, I mean, I want to have her on just by herself. I had her on with Chiran and Donald before. So she's still thinking. I think she still needs some time to,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, yes. But you should tag her for us, right? tell her,
Yes, yes, I
tell
will.
her,
I will.
yes.
I'll
Help
definitely
us.
mention you
Yes,
to her.
yes,
Yes, yes.
great, great, good stuff. So I think we have done a lot of discussion today on all the way from like why you should be political, the local landscape, what you can do from voting, keeping up with the news, doing individual action, all the way to even tattering on the grounds of activism and joining, different initiatives and all that, right? So I think we have went through a lot that I think our listeners and the average Singaporean can actually do something about it, right? So do you have any last things you want to add on this note?
Right. So what I wanted to say is hope is sometimes hope is the only thing that a human being has.
Mm,
Right? You lose hope, you lose everything. You lose the impetus for change. Right? So And we do not just have to think. Now my philosophy is, those who are privileged, like you and I, privileged to some extent, right? We must always do more for other people, right? And to do more, invariably you have to be a bit more political. Now, even if you don't think that, just out of self-preservation, just out of personal selfish interest, it's still useful to be more political,
Mm,
right? Not less political. It's always not partisan, more political, right? So we must always strive to be more political, more politically aware, more politically astute, more politically critical, and more politically involved in the various ways I've mentioned. And I know some people, they do not want to volunteer with a party like myself, and that's perfectly fine as well. There are many other ways to be political, and do not belittle your own efforts. You will always get people who are saying, "Oh, what's the point, right? What's the point of doing this?" We should ignore those kinds of criticisms. But of course, you must also be wary of cheerleaders who, "Oh, you're doing this great, you're doing this great." Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we must always, like, okay, just bring ourselves down. Okay, yeah, we're not that great, you know. So,
mm, mm,
so we
mm,
must
mm.
always find that balance. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. I appreciate your time. I think that's awesome. We will end here for the podcast, and so it's amazing. I love it. Right. So that
Thanks
is.
for having me on.
Yeah, great. So this is all will be post and we'll put on our podcast. So for our post producer, recognize that we're gonna stop here. But I have a few personal questions.
Sure,
So
sure, no
that this
problem.
is for the podcast. It's gonna be,
No.
for our audience. But since you're here, I really have to ask, and one of our listeners are asking some more specific political questions. That is not relevant to the podcast. So like your thoughts, right?
So all of this will be uploaded, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
everything
yeah, yeah.
before will be uploaded from here on is
Oh,
our
oh,
discussion.
it's not uploaded already. Oh, okay.
No, yes. So we're already live, right? So, but we will
Yeah, yeah,
also
yeah.
post and upload it, right? So,
Okay.
someone asked, what are your thoughts on reserve presidency?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. So I'm a fan of the GRC because I think there is value in having minority MPs. But going back to what I said earlier, there is a cost, right? There cost, and there are multiple costs. One is there may be a compromise on merit, although that is not too big of a cost because we do have good candidates. The other cause is there may be a credibility problem with the minority MPs. They may see these minority MPs are you're piggybacking on the Chinese candidate. So there is a cost to the credibility of candidates, but I think overall uh, it's worth it. Now, for the reserve presidency, there is that cost, that credibility, and there is no significant benefit. We do not need a minority president, right? If
Mm,
a minority wins, a minority wins. But even if there is no minority president, we don't lose anything because it's a ceremonial position. So I
mm.
am not a fan of the reserve presidency. Yeah,
Yeah. But it
yeah,
also
and
cost the PAP some votes. So yes, I do
I
think
think
so.
so, and
I
and
think
I
so.
think so, and I think it also, unfortunately, I think cost President Halima some credibility as well.
Oh, not some. I think a lot. I know. I hear from my friends that she is very popular in her area, and she's
She
done a
and
lot
not
of good
just
work.
in her popular in NTUC,
Mm,
she was consistently one of the highest, if not the highest voted
mm,
member, and uh, she was very popular, right? And now
mm,
I think, to what end, right? As in, if she had just contested in an open election and if she had won, she would be so much more credible. So I think it's unfortunately it was a disservice to her as well. So I'm not
yeah.
I'm not a fan of the reserve
Yeah,
presidency.
she's a
Yeah.
sacrifice, a little sad, but yes. I also want to ask a little bit about being opportunistic, right? So the I think there's a little bit of discussion here and there about being opportunistic. In my view, I'm pretty supportive of being opportunistic in a sense of
Mm,
like, it's very hard to drive media narratives. It's very hard to drive attention, especially in a time when attention is being fought by all these things, right? So
right.
if there's something happens and you actually share the cause, the belief, of this particular thing, and what's wrong with being opportunistic of this situation to rally and
Right.
talk about it and bring it into the realms of the public?
Right. So are you talking about the Sarah incident or what? As
Oh
in,
yeah,
and
yeah,
what?
yeah. The
Yeah.
Sarah, the
Okay.
PA, the PA. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Sarah was labeled as an opportunist by few people, right?
Yeah.
Or at least they hinted at it, right? Although I'm not talking about NMP Joshua because he sort of clarified his stance, right, in my live with him. So not him, but other people have made that accusation about Sarah. And what I would say is, first of all, people living in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones, right? Politicians are the last people who should be calling others opportunistic, right? When there's a Singaporean sportsman, sportswoman who wins, suddenly they post about that. What's that? That's opportunism, right? That's pure opportunism, right?
Low
So
fruits. Yes.
politicians are the last people who should be talking about others being opportunistic. Secondly, right, being opportunistic to what end? If as you said, if you are opportunistic because there's a media wave and you're riding on it in order to educate the public, go ahead, be opportunistic, right? If you are doing that to make yourself richer, even personally, I mean, if you are not a politician, nothing wrong with that, right? Yeah, but if you are people in power and you are being opportunistic to enrich yourself instead of the institution, then that's a problem, right? So the term itself doesn't mean much. It's used as a red herring, it's used as a slur in some way, right? Because it was used to delegitimize what Sarah was doing, right? When, even from my personal conversation with her, but even from that live, I never felt that. I felt that she is probably part of what you can consider the woke crowd, right?
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
and and that was what I mean. I'm not from there, but I can see that 5 minutes into the conversation, I can see where she's coming from already, right? That kind of language, and it's unfortunate that when I saw that, what I saw was somebody who's genuine. I largely agree with her. I do not entirely agree with her, but I didn't doubt her intentions. It's unfortunate that when somebody saw that and saw, oh, this is an opportunist. What's her agenda? Is she joining the opposition, right? If we start restricting criticisms, right, we start saying that somebody who criticizes because they want only because they want to join the opposition, right? Then you are really not creating a society that you say you want, which is a healthy society with room for disagreements and different voices.
fair, fair. I
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
sound very agreeable with you. I think we're quite aligned. We're quite aligned on this. I
Yeah.
stand with Walid. Okay, but yeah. So I also wanna ask about certain exactly like what you say, right? The politicians, they take on the very low hanging fruit, like you lose Olympics, okay, I can stand with you. You win
Yeah,
Olympics, I
yeah,
also can stand with you. It's so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
easy. I'm like, this
yeah,
is like
exactly,
dude, this
exactly,
is political opportunist, right? Like, oh,
exactly. Yeah,
just
yeah,
take
yeah,
whatever position the public is taking. This is
yeah,
easy
yeah,
shit, right? So, and there is an endless discussion of politicians taking easy positions to build their political resource and their political, affinity. But it seems like in at least in our political landscape, our politicians are not taking the harder positions. Things like racism. Recently, it's becoming more and more of a discussion, and also things like LGBT, right? And I think within our community, it's quite stupid. We had to do episodes talking about how the LGBT community can use the public housing scheme.
yeah,
I'm like, dude, public housing isn't it for everybody? But there's a
yeah,
certain social community that is being
yeah,
priced out because they cannot get married and da da da
yeah,
what have you, right? So what is your take on this, where politicians are taking the easy stuff,
right.
they're not doing the touchy stuff, and
so, so I
is
would
it
say that.
political suicide and all that kind of stuff?
So I would say there's variation. Sometimes they do take the difficult decisions, right? I mean, the reserve presidency was deeply unpopular, right?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, is that really the difficult
Is it
decision? Because
important? I was like,
yeah,
should you
yeah,
do it?
exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
so there are sometimes where they make the difficult decisions. And initially, when the government was saying we are going to move to an endemic, I thought that was really courageous. But then
Mm,
and then they reverted back to the no dining in. I mean, that's a separate matter. But
mm.
I felt if that they had followed through with the endemic, right, they would have really shown really courage in a difficult situation, right? Because people are, I mean, it's very easy for privileged people to say, oh, let's have lockdowns, let's not. Yeah, but there are a lot of people who suffer, there
Dude,
are
they
a
got a
lot of
ten
people who
thousand
suffer.
square foot house.
Yeah,
People,
exactly, exactly. And then no dining in, how much it hurts the hawkers, and it hurts the F&B, the
yeah.
grab drivers, it's
Mm.
it's just crazy. So I felt if they had done that, then that would have been a truly difficult decision. Section 377A, even the opposition doesn't take it on,
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly. So I'm
Even
not
the
saying
opposition
just the
doesn't take it
PAP
on.
thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So,
Mm-mm,
so, uh, and there is a reason why. That
mm,
reason is a mistake to think that the PAP is conservative on this. They are
mm, mm,
conservative on other
mm, mm,
matters,
mm,
but
mm,
on
mm,
this the PAP is not conservative. On this the PAP is electoral, right?
mm, mm,
So it's just that the sense is now it's even Stevens, right? It seems
mm,
like both the liberals and conservative, maybe 60-40 or 65-35. It's not it's not worth it to take a strong stance in favor of one group for from their perspective electorally, right? But I can tell you,
mm,
I am quite confident the moment the pendulum shifts decisively in favor of the liberals, that's where the parties will move as well.
mm. So this
So
is the whole median voter theory kind of thing,
this one,
where
yes. So
that
for this one is just electoral. I call this electoral secularism.
mm,
This particular issue. So it's not a strong stance at all. Now, has the PAP taken difficult decisions? Of course they have, right? There are difficult decisions that have. The CPF is. I mean, if you know, I mean, people are complaining about it, especially if I think maybe we are around the same age, and our elderly parents, the strictness about the Medisave, for instance, right?
mm,
Yeah,
mm,
that one is the elderly. A lot of them are really unhappy with that, right?
mm,
So there
mm,
are difficult decisions that they have made as well. So I don't wanna say that they do not do that at all. So there's variation. I think the section 377A is a particular one where you can see that they are being electoral about it, both parties, and in fact the
yes,
other.
yes.
If you remember, even the SDP, which is the most left on this, when
Mm,
Dr. Vijay Singha came out openly, mysteriously after that he left the party, right. I mean, he wasn't sacked or anything, right? But for me, like, it does seem like it's related to that. So ultimately, and this is the dilemma for them, which is why sometimes we cannot expect politicians sometimes to be the moral leaders, because
mm,
ultimately they have to pander electorally. Ultimately they have to do that, right? So it is up to civil society to push what you think is moral,
mm,
is the
mm.
most moral stance. Yeah, so we cannot expect them to be the moral leaders all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the doing content, doing rallies, doing all the stuff that people are doing, I think it's a call to every individual to, be more active in society and take your
absolutely,
position and push out
absolutely,
things to
absolutely.
swing the
and
narrative. I think
and also section 377A, right, is not an OB marker.
mm, mm,
It's not race, it's not race, where it's much more touchy. Even then it's beginning to open up the space on race, right? But section 377A and LGBT issues, right, there's a lot of space to be for and against.
mm, mm,
Right?
mm, mm,
So that's something, even those who are passionate about it, go and champion that, right?
mm,
So yeah, and I think, going back to the NMPs, I think NMPs are uniquely positioned actually to propose the repeal of section 377A.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think someone tried lah, huh? But the Aware
Yeah,
Saga.
but that was long ago,
Yes,
2000,
yes, yes.
2007. I
Mm,
think the mood in 2021 is completely different from 2007. But that person has definitely kickstarted. You're talking about Siu Kam Hong, right? Definitely
yes.
kickstarted this whole process. I mean, gay activism has taken on a completely. I mean, he has to take a lot of credit for that,
Mm.
right?
Yes, 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 for sure. Good stuff, good stuff. And I feel very proud that I know a lot of these things. I'm very updated, not bad.
Yeah, you are. You are.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, man. Dude, I
Yeah.
invest a lot of time in all these. Right? I was like, yeah, we
Okay,
must care
right,
about
right.
society and all that jazz. And
That's
exactly like what you said, I think Lawrence Wong recently came out to say that, we have to win votes. And that is
yeah,
a very clear stance, where in the
absolutely.
past it always seems like it's very technocratic and they're just doing
Yeah.
the best that they can. But
Right, right, yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah.
but fundamentally things are changing, and I think all those stuff are great. So thanks for coming. Thanks for spending time.
No
We
problem.
need to have Teh Tarik
Oh,
together.
for sure.
For
100%.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
After the lockdown is lifted, but for everyone that is still listening, and for everyone that will be listening, you definitely check out Walid's podcast, Teh Tarik with Walid. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Thanks
Woo!
for the plug, and
Bye.
thanks for this. Bye bye.
Awesome.